The maps are already drawn. They just haven't shown them to you yet. And that right there is the thing that should make every single American sit up and pay close attention, Sean, because what is happening right now in the Gulf, what is happening between Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran is not a news headline. It is a restructuring of the entire world order, and it is being built on a foundation of satellite feeds, encrypted navigation systems, and intelligence networks that most people in this country have never once heard discussed in any serious way. We are not talking about abstract geopolitics. We are talking about a live war, a war that started on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran. And from that very first moment, Iran was not fighting alone. Russia and China were right there, not with boots on the ground, not with their flags flying over Tehran, but in ways that are, in many respects, far more consequential and far more difficult to counter. So let us sit with that for a moment and really think about what that means, because the implications reach far beyond the Gulf. They reach into your economy, your energy costs, your safety, and the long-term trajectory of American power in the world. When 3 senior American officials told the Washington Post that Russia was providing Iran with sensitive intelligence, including the precise locations of U.S. warships and aircraft operating across the Middle East, they revealed more than a tactical alliance. They exposed the architecture of a new kind of war, a war without front lines, fought not with tanks or missiles, but with radar beams, satellite feeds, and encrypted coordinates. Think about what that actually means in practice. Those U.S. aircraft carrier strike groups sitting in the Gulf, the USS Abraham Lincoln, the USS Gerald R. Ford, they are sitting inside a targeting envelope. And the people holding the targeting data are not just Iranians. The Russians are feeding it to them. This is not speculation. This is what American officials themselves are saying quietly, off the record, to major newspapers. And yet somehow this does not make the front page in the way it deserves to. Russian President Vladimir Putin reportedly denied that Moscow was sharing such intelligence with Iran during a call with U.S. President Donald Trump. The denial, however, changes little. Russia has received Iranian drones and munitions for its war in Ukraine. It has watched the U.S. supply Ukraine with targeting intelligence used to strike Russian positions. Moscow's calculus is not hard to read. Intelligence is a currency. Putin is simply spending it. Now that is a sentence worth turning over slowly in your mind. Intelligence is a currency, and Putin has been accumulating it, watching it, studying it for years, watching how America operates, watching where the ships go, watching what frequencies the aircraft use, watching the patterns. And now he is cashing that in the Gulf against American assets through the proxy of an Iranian military that previously could not have found those targets on its own. U.S. officials reported that Moscow supplied Iran with real-time data on American warships and aircraft, enabling more precise retaliatory strikes. This assistance included satellite feeds from Russian assets, which helped Iran monitor U.S. positions. Now you have to think about what this does to American military doctrine. For decades, the entire strategic premise of U.S. power projection in that part of the world was based on the assumption of information dominance. We know where everything is, and you do not know where we are. That asymmetry was the foundation of American military superiority in the Gulf since at least 1991. And right now, in the first months of 2026, that asymmetry is being systematically dismantled, not by Iran, which does not have the capability to do it alone, but by Russia and China working in coordination, each contributing a different piece of the puzzle. Russia's intelligence pipeline has allowed Iran to locate U.S. and Israeli assets with a precision Tehran could not achieve alone. Iran operates only a limited constellation of military reconnaissance satellites, wholly insufficient for tracking fast-moving naval assets across open water. Russia does not share that limitation. Its advanced overhead surveillance network, including the Canopus V satellite, redesignated Khayyam upon transfer to Iranian operational use, provides Tehran with round-the-clock optical and radar imagery. For Iran, this is not a supplement to its military capability. It is the nervous system of its precision strike doctrine. That last part is what I want you to really hear. The nervous system, not a supplement. The nervous system. Without Russian satellite data, Iran's precision missiles are flying somewhat blind. With Russian satellite data, they know exactly what they are looking for and where it is. That is the difference between a weapon system and a weapon system that actually works at the highest level. The drone that slammed into a U.S. military facility in Kuwait, killing 6 American service members, did not find its target by accident. Pentagon officials, speaking on condition of anonymity, noted that several recent Iranian strikes hit facilities directly associated with U.S. operations, targets whose coordinates do not appear on any public map. Targets whose coordinates do not appear on any public map. Let that sink in. Those are classified locations, and Iranian drones are hitting them. So the question you have to ask, the question every serious analyst has to ask, is this: how does Iran know where those facilities are if not for outside intelligence support? And the answer that American officials themselves are giving quietly is that Russia is telling them. Now let us talk about China, because China's role in this story is in some ways even more significant than Russia's, because it is more durable and more structurally embedded. China did not just show up when the bombs started falling. China has been building this relationship with Iran for years, deliberately, systematically, with a very clear strategic logic behind every move. Beijing's role is quieter, but it is no less consequential. China has spent years reshaping Iran's electronic warfare landscape, exporting advanced radar systems, transitioning Iranian military navigation from U.S. GPS to China's encrypted Beidou 3 constellation, and drawing on its expanding satellite network to support signals intelligence and terrain mapping for Iranian forces. Now, Beidou is something that does not get nearly enough attention in American media or in American public discourse, and it absolutely should, because what China has done is essentially offered Iran an alternative GPS system, one that is encrypted, one that the United States cannot jam or spoof the way it could potentially interfere with GPS signals. In the last 10 years, China and Iran have enhanced their cooperation in missile technology development, satellite and space initiatives, intelligence sharing, cybersecurity, and electronic warfare. Joint military exercises involving China, Iran, and Russia in the Indian Ocean and Gulf of Oman since 2019 have underscored an increasing degree of strategic coordination. These exercises indicate a mutual interest in challenging Western naval supremacy while facilitating operational learning and technological exchange. So this is not something that started when the war started. This is a decade-long architecture of military and technological cooperation that was specifically designed to counter American power. The war just activated it. The infrastructure was already there. The YLC-8B anti-stealth radar, a Chinese-supplied UHF band system, uses low-frequency waves designed to reduce the effectiveness of radar-absorbent coatings on U.S. stealth aircraft. The B-21 Raider and the F-35C were engineered to be invisible. Against a YLC-8B, they are considerably less so. This is the part of the story that should genuinely alarm anyone who has spent time thinking about American military superiority. The stealth aircraft program represents hundreds of billions of dollars of American investment and decades of technological development, and China has supplied Iran with radar technology that makes those aircraft less invisible. That is an extraordinary development, and it connects directly to the broader strategic competition between the United States and China, because China is watching every engagement, learning from every exchange, updating its own doctrine for the scenario that actually keeps Beijing awake at night, which is Taiwan. There is a deeper strategic logic at work that goes beyond Iran's immediate survival. China is not arming Tehran out of ideological solidarity. It is treating the conflict as a live fire laboratory. Every potential engagement against a U.S. carrier strike group can generate targeting and intercept data that Beijing's military planners will study exhaustively, refining doctrine for the one scenario China actually cares about: Taiwan. And this is the thing that makes this conflict so much larger than just Iran and the United States. China is using this war to study American military tactics, American reaction times, American electronic warfare capabilities, American carrier group vulnerabilities. All of it is being cataloged, analyzed, fed into Chinese military planning for a future conflict that most American policymakers are not yet willing to publicly discuss in these terms. In December 2025, Tehran reportedly finalized a major agreement with Russia valued at nearly $590 million focused on strengthening Iran's air defense capabilities. The deal includes large quantities of portable air defense systems and thousands of associated missiles designed to counter aircraft, drones, and low-altitude threats. For Iran, whose conventional air force remains limited compared with U.S. capabilities, air defense modernization is not optional. It is existential. Think about the timing of that deal. December 2025, 2 months before the U.S. and Israel launched their strikes on February 28, 2026, which means that either Russia knew the strikes were coming, and there is good reason to believe they did, or Russia had been building this partnership so methodically that the timing was irrelevant because the architecture was already in place regardless of when the conflict began. In January 2025, Russia and Iran signed a comprehensive strategic partnership treaty covering areas from trade and military cooperation to science, culture, and education. The agreement deepened defense and intelligence coordination and supported projects such as transport corridors, linking Russia to the Gulf through Iran. The pair carried out joint military drills in the Indian Ocean as recently as late February, the week before the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran. Late February, the week before. The week before the airstrikes began, Russia and Iran were conducting joint military drills in the Indian Ocean. Now, you can believe that is a coincidence if you like, but if you have spent any time studying how these things work, how great powers signal each other, how military exercises function as both preparation and communication, you know that is not a coincidence. That is coordination. And now consider the economic dimension of all this, because the geopolitics and the economics are inseparable, and any analysis that treats them as separate is incomplete. China officially declared itself neutral, not wanting to alienate whatever possible regime change in Iran, as Iran is China's third largest supplier of crude oil, with expected increases in China's energy import costs, and China has invested over $100 billion in energy and infrastructure projects in Iran, which could be halted by the fighting or by sanctions. $100 billion. That is China's direct economic stake in Iran. That is not ideological solidarity. That is not anti-American sentiment. That is a rational calculation about energy security and strategic investment. And China is going to protect that investment by making sure Iran has the tools to survive this conflict, while being careful enough not to trigger a direct confrontation with the United States that could threaten China's own economic relationships with the West. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called Russia and China Iran's strategic partners and said his country was receiving military cooperation from the two U.S. adversaries, but declined to elaborate. That includes military cooperation, he said. I'm not going into any details of that. Good cooperation with these countries, politically, economically, even militarily. And that word, strategically, is the one that matters most, because strategic partnership is not the same as an alliance of convenience. Strategic partnership means that Moscow and Beijing have made a long-term calculation that a world in which American power is unchallenged is worse for them than a world in which American power is constrained, even if that constraint comes at a cost. And they are willing to pay that cost in intelligence, in hardware, in radar technology, in satellite data, measured and calibrated so as not to trigger a wider war, but substantial enough to make a genuine difference on the battlefield. For decades, the Gulf was a theater of overwhelming U.S.-Israeli technological dominance. That dominance has not vanished, but it has been eroded quietly and deliberately by years of Chinese hardware transfers and Russian intelligence sharing. As a senior U.S. military commander recently acknowledged, signals are the new bullets. Whoever controls the spectrum controls the fight. Neither side controls it decisively. That, in itself, is a profound shift. Neither side controls it decisively. Read that again. For the first time in decades, the United States does not have decisive control of the electromagnetic spectrum in the Gulf. That is not a minor tactical footnote. That is a strategic earthquake. And it did not happen because of anything that occurred in the last few months. It happened because of decisions made years ago in Moscow and Beijing, decisions that were patient, methodical, and oriented towards precisely this kind of outcome. Iran has studied that war, the 1991 Gulf War, closely for 3 decades. It has studied every subsequent conflict in which a technologically inferior force was dismantled from the air. Russia's satellite feeds and China's radar architecture are, in part, Iran's answer to those lessons. Tehran is determined not to become the next Baghdad, and that determination, backed by Russian intelligence and Chinese technology, changes the fundamental nature of this conflict. It means that the military tools America relied on in 1991 and 2003 in every Gulf engagement since, the stealth aircraft, the precision-guided munitions launched from ships offshore, the assumption of information dominance, none of those tools work as cleanly as they once did. The battlefield has been fundamentally altered by choices made in boardrooms and intelligence agencies in Moscow and Beijing over the past 10 years. Russia, meanwhile, has watched Western sanctions and Ukrainian targeting intelligence hollow out its own military credibility. Enabling Iran to bleed U.S. forces and drain their interceptor stocks in the Gulf is not merely transactional. It is a form of strategic debt collection. Strategic debt collection. What a phrase. Because that is exactly what this is. Every Patriot missile that gets fired at an incoming Iranian drone is a Patriot missile that cannot be reloaded immediately, and stockpiles are finite. Every F-35 sortie flown to intercept an Iranian strike package is fuel burned, munitions expended, pilot hours consumed. Russia is helping Iran impose costs on the American military machine. Not enough to trigger a direct response against Moscow, but enough to matter, enough to accumulate, enough to degrade American capability incrementally. While Russia watches from a comfortable distance, the Gulf is becoming the first theater where electronic warfare may prove more decisive than conventional firepower. Alliances are being redrawn not by troop deployments or treaty signings, but by intelligence flows and satellite constellations. Russia and China are not sending divisions to Tehran's aid. They are doing something more durable. They are teaching Iran how to see. Teaching Iran how to see. That is the secret map the title of this video points to, not a physical map drawn on paper. A map drawn in frequencies and satellite orbits and encrypted data streams. A map that shows Iran where American power is concentrated, where it is vulnerable, and how to reach it. And Russia and China built that map together over years with patience and with purpose. The question for Americans, and this is the question that matters most, is whether the people making decisions in Washington truly understand the depth of what has been built against them. Because the response you hear publicly, the reassurances that the U.S. is tracking everything, that dominance is maintained, that the situation is under control, those reassurances may be true in a narrow tactical sense, but in the broader strategic sense, in the sense of what this conflict reveals about where power is shifting in the world and how fast it is shifting, the reassurances are not sufficient. What is happening in the Gulf right now is not just about Iran. It is about the shape of the next 50 years. It is about whether American primacy in the Middle East and beyond can survive a world in which Russia and China have decided deliberately and systematically that it should not. And the maps that answer that question, the real maps, the ones drawn in satellite feeds and intelligence flows and encrypted navigation data, those maps already exist. They just have not shown them to you yet.